Hello, and welcome to Lunch with Lake Ridge, where we serve bite-sized pieces of community information that you can digest at your convenience. I am Melissa Ferrone, the Director of Operations for the Lake Ridge Parks and Recreation Association, located in eastern Prince William County, and your host for this segment. Today, we have Prince William County Fire and Rescue Chief Thomas LaBelle. He's here to share valuable information with the residents of Lake Ridge. Chief LaBelle, thank you so much for joining us for lunch.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Chief LaBelle, I understand that after 30 years working in emergency service organizations, you assumed the position of Prince William County Fire Chief in May of this year. I know that your career field can be more of a calling than an occupation. What drove you to pursue a career in emergency services?
So actually, both my father and grandfather were career firefighters in upstate New York. My grandfather was a fire chief and my dad retired as a lieutenant. My grandfather started in the 1930s. And so long history within emergency services for my family.
Wow, that is incredible and admirable. A legacy of heroes. In your
I don't know if I would call us that, although I appreciate it. I think if you had asked any of us, we all consider ourselves very lucky to be able to serve our community in this format.
Well, we're lucky to be a part of your community that you're serving. So thank you. So it's the season. We're setting up our Christmas decorations. We're trying all of our Christmas seasonal foods and feasts. Before setting up those decorations and preheating the oven for our holiday meals, what's your recommended home fire safety checklist?
So the first thing to always keep in mind is that most of our decorations involve electricity. And so making sure that we're using the appropriate electrical appliances, so extension cords that are UL approved and the right size for the number of lights that you are stringing up, if you're stringing up lights, but also recognizing that there are things such as indoor lights and outdoor lights, and you should use them that way. They're made for that. And then probably one of the biggest items is, who doesn't love a fresh Christmas tree?
Mm-hmm.
I, for one, certainly do. But keeping them properly hydrated is much more difficult than sometimes people realize. And so constantly watering. One of the problems that folks will run into is they will get their Christmas tree, they'll put it up, they'll do a great job watering it, and then they stop, they forget for a little bit of time, and then they go to rewater it. And the problem is, quite often, the system that draws the water up through the trunk has sort of died off during that dry spell. It's contracted, and what means you won't be watering the tree as effectively as you think you are. And so the easiest thing to do at that point, or the most appropriate thing to do, maybe not the easiest, is to recut the bottom of the tree to expose fresh wood to draw that new water back up. And so that's a big part of it. I have a friend who has a wonderful cat who really enjoys their Christmas.
Oh no.
And so just bearing that in mind as well. And then finally, what I would say is, it's not just the Christmas tree, but we pack our Christmas presents around the Christmas tree. And obviously that paper is incredibly flammable. Most of the things that are in those wonderful boxes are pretty flammable as well. And so just keeping space between the tree and the packages, making sure that lights aren't laying on the packages, all of those things help. And then probably the last piece is, after all the presents are opened on Christmas morning, a lot of people are drawn to taking that wrapping paper and throwing it in the fireplace to get rid of it. It burns at an incredibly high heat. And if your fireplace hasn't been properly cleaned and it is on the verge of having a chimney fire, it will pretty much guarantee a chimney fire if you're burning those things in your fireplace. So please don't.
Wow, those are really great tips. I never thought about watering the tree and having, well, I mean, you think about watering the tree, but how that could create such a problem.
Absolutely.
Wow. And now that we've all made it through Thanksgiving, hopefully, right? We've done our turkeys, but Christmas has its own kinds of pies and hams that we're putting in the oven. What can we do to make sure that we're running a safer kitchen and not getting too confident after making it through Thanksgiving?
Well, it's interesting you put it that way, because I think a lot of it does have to do with confidence. And so it's easy to ignore things when we feel pretty confident about them. And so, particularly when the house is full of guests, right, we're drawn to go talk to them, which is really a huge part of the season. But leaving food unattended on the stove is a huge contributor to house fires. One thing I would suggest is recognizing that a lot of folks have a pretty simple solution. And it is, if you're walking away from your stove for a minute to do something, take a kitchen utensil with you, a wooden spoon, what have you. And as you walk out and you're having a conversation with folks, you'll suddenly realize, oh, I've got this wooden spoon in my hand. I've got food on the stove. I need to go back and check on the food. It's a pretty easy but pretty simple way. And then the last piece is recognizing that your home is full of visitors, and sometimes those visitors are spending the night, and they may not be familiar with your home. And as silly as it may sound, just having a really brief conversation with them about getting out of the house if there is a fire. It's incredibly important. One of the things I like to remind people is when if our folks show up because you have a house fire, the first thing we're worried about is you. And so if you're outside, we can spend much more of our focus on putting the fire out as quickly, as efficiently as possible, and not about trying to rescue you out of the building. And of course, we'll do whatever it takes, but the easier you make our job, the easier our job is.
That's fantastic. Great tips. I would have never thought of, running your emergency routes by your guests, but that makes complete sense.
Particularly if you have a meeting place. If I
Yeah.
can real quick, if you have, and you should have a designed, predetermined meeting place for you and your family, letting your guests know where that meeting place is certainly is helpful as well.
That's great. Are there any other common misconceptions about fire safety during the holidays that you want to address?
I think, we're probably through sort of the biggest piece, which is when heating systems first kick on, but it's been cold, and so most people have been able to do that. The other thing is, I'll just reiterate, fireplaces, particularly not gas fireplaces, but solid fuel burning wood fireplaces. If you haven't been maintaining them, a lot of folks will suddenly decide as Christmas season rolls up, now is the time to have a fire in our fireplace. If you haven't had it checked, please make sure you have your chimney checked.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yes.
And what about safety considerations for our neighbors in apartments and condos?
So they're pretty much the same. I think the biggest issue for folks in apartments and condos is to recognize that just like a home, we need you to think about how you're getting out. And sometimes that can be a little more complex in a multi-family unit, whether it's condos or apartments, and having a unified meeting place for your family, because it can be very confusing at places that have multiple families when we pull up figuring if everyone is out and accounted for. The other thing I would point out is to recognize for folks in apartment complexes and condos and even townhomes. I live in an end unit townhome, and it's been wonderful. It's a little cold right now, and you can sense that a little more in an end unit townhome. And so sometimes folks will want to use additional heating appliances like space heaters, things of that nature. And so make sure that you're keeping the appropriate amount of space around that space heater. Remember, it's a space heater, not just for the amount of space it heats up, but also the amount of space it needs.
Fantastic. Our community really appreciates the dedication and sacrifice of Prince William County Fire and Rescue. How can we show our appreciation?
Well, I think folks do it every single day. I have to tell you, I'm really excited to be here. Incredibly friendly community, which I certainly appreciate, as does my family. I was at fire stations on Thanksgiving Day, and people were dropping off food and their thanks. And so I think our folks recognize how much we're appreciated in the community. But the reality at the end of the day is the most important way you can support us is by practicing fire safety at home. I tell people all the time, if I had a magic wand and can wave it and there would never be another fire, I would wave that magic wand in a heartbeat. We recognize we're a necessary part of our community, and we're all thrilled to be serving our community in this way. But at the same time, we don't want to have to. And so I think recognizing the more you can do to limit fire hazard, the more you're helping us.
Wow. Thank you. Chief LaBelle, thank you so much for taking the time to share these nuggets. We look forward to having you dish up more news soon. Mary Oliver once said, keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great Christmas.